Of entitlement obligation, a social security system that's broke. They have to work hard to keep paying into the system, on, and they know it doesn't work. So when I talk about saving $100, $200, $300, $400 billion a year and come home and let them get out of Social Security, they're all for it.
You said we can't pay lip service to the Constitution. Which of the fellow Republican candidates do you think does that the most?
No, I'm not going to volunteer. I think I'm going to let somebody else figure that out, because I think all of Washington is guilty of that. If you look at Congress, if you look at the Supreme Court, if you look at the executive branch for the last 50, 60, 70 years, they do pay a lot of lip service because we have embarked on an unconstitutional manner over these last 100 years. But every single person in Washington takes the oath of office to obey the Constitution, and obviously they don't follow it.
I hear that your support scares the Republican establishment. Should they be scared?
Well, if power is the only thing they seek, they might be scared. If they wanted constitutional limit in the government and believed in individual liberty and balanced budget, they shouldn't be frightened. So I don't know why they should be frightened. The leadership in the party might be, but the grassroots wouldn't be frightened with the program I'm talking about.
If you were elected president, how would you get anything passed by the Congress? How would you get any restricting reforms passed by a Democratic Congress?
Well, I think that a lot of what I'm talking about has great appeal to the Democrats. They believe in civil liberties. They believe in a different foreign policy. They're highly critical of what we're doing. So I think I could get a consensus with them, especially if I talk about never throwing people out in the streets. And see, in spite of some of these programs we shouldn't have started, I want to get the young people out. The elderly are totally dependent, and they're going to be out in the streets if we continue to do what we're doing. And the only way we can save our dollar and save the system and tide us over and work our way out of this is to cut this overseas spending. So this is very appealing to Democrats as well as Republicans, for that matter. It's very appealing to America to come up with a sensible program. They have to just decide whether or not we have a problem. If they don't think we have a problem, they probably will say, why don't you just go away because everything is fine and we can get young people like you to work forever and take care of everybody else. But that's
I'm in college, and I was wondering, what exactly do you feel New Hampshire's role is in your personal campaign?
Well, I think it's very important. It's it's the second primary, and I think if somebody does very well on it, they get national attention, and you just keep going on into the next election. So obviously, it's very important. There's been a lot of candidates up here on both sides here for the past year.
Thank you.
How do you assess your performance?
I was wondering if it would be possible to arrange a ride in the blimp.
Well, I'm not in charge of the blimp. That's an independent. It's an independent expenditure. So you have to call the blimp people.
What's a good showing for you?
Ready?
Dr. Paul.
1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck.
I think so, but I don't make predictions.
I think we'll
do well.
How do you assess your performance tonight? Are you happy with it?
I felt good about it. Because of the format. I like the format. It was less rigid and it was fairer. It was run.
Now, Ron Paul may not be able to poll high in the mainstream media's polls, but in my opinion, he represents everything that a politician should represent. He speaks patriotically about individual freedom and constitutional liberty, and that is why people are continuing to support him and helping him to spread his message. Now I'd like to read a quote from Margaret Mead talking about how all of us must stay positive and committed to our common goal, because that will be how real change will be attained. The quote goes like this: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Now, with that in mind, I think it's important that we stay focused on our goal. No one said that it would be easy, but we have the strength in numbers needed to accomplish our goal. The next clip I would like to go to is Ron Paul speaking at the New Hampshire Town Hall Meeting, which was the night that Fox News excluded him from the Republican Forum.
You mentioned that voters seem to want change, and of course the other candidates are talking about change as well. As president, what changes would you make once you were sworn in?
Well, the biggest changes that a president could bring about quickly would be in foreign policy. And you're right, there's a lot of the other candidates that want change. For instance, they do talk about the foreign policy and the war going on over in the Middle East. But most of the time, what they're talking about is change, is they want a change of management style. They want to say, well, more troops here, more troops there, and I would do this, I would do that. But I'm not talking about that type of change. I'm talking about a more strategic, philosophic change, questioning whether or not we should be the policemen of the world, whether or not we should have an empire, whether or not we should be in 130 countries, whether or not we should have 700 bases around the world. And dealing also, with the idea of how do we pay for this and what's happening to us. So I want significant changes. And the most important thing a president could do is change that. We could bring peace to the Middle East with a few significant changes. We don't need to be fighting wars that were unnecessary. And we went into the war in Iraq without a declaration of war. There were no weapons of mass destruction. There were no Al-Qaeda in the region. There was no threat to our national security. And we all recognize this. And the others who claim they want change have dug their heels in, and their change is, why don't we just send more troops? And then they're talking about what are we going to do in Pakistan, and we're also very much involved in Afghanistan, and it goes on and on. So that type of change is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about change in foreign policy. A president has a lot of authority on foreign policy and movement of troops, and eventually this is the only way we can work out of our financial mess, is starting to bring these troops home, spending that money here at home rather than overseas.
Okay, thank you. We will go to questions from the audience in just a moment, but one other question for you, Dr. Paul, from me. Candidates, Republican and Democrat, have been talking about a so-called strong America. What is your vision of a strong America, and how do we as a nation get there?
Well, sometimes people, when they want to act strong, they overreact. I think somebody who is strong is self-confident, and they don't have to be bullying themselves around. Self-confidence is what we need. And when we go about the world and say that our strength is that we will tell other people what to do, I don't think that is a sense of strength. A sense of strength is a sense of confidence that you can have a strong national defense, which we need and should have. The foreign policy we have today is actually weak. Us. And we want a strong national defense, but we also want a foreign policy that is designed that shows cooperation with people, not antagonism, not threatening people. So far, we've had so few choices.